In the heart of Hollywood, where dreams and nightmares often dance together, an act of kindness was about to unfold that would remind the world why some stars shine brighter off-screen than on it. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread drifted through Mario's Corner Cafe, where 78-year-old Arthur Mitchell sat at his usual spot by the window. His kind eyes, the color of faded denim, watched the world go by as he enjoyed his lunch. The silver-haired man had a habit of smiling at everyone who caught his eye, unaware that someone was watching him with far less friendly intentions. Across the street, hidden in the shadow of a bus stop, stood a man whose life had taken all the wrong turns. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and his eyes darted around like a trapped animal's. For weeks he'd been studying this little restaurant and its customers, particularly the old man who always paid in cash, his wrinkled hands carefully counting out bills from a worn leather wallet. Today was different. The thief's stomach growled as he watched Arthur through the window, reminding him why he was about to do something terrible. He'd seen how Arthur's hands shook slightly when holding his coffee cup, how he moved with the careful slowness of someone who knew their bones weren't as strong as they used to be. The lunch crowd was starting to thin out when Arthur asked for his check. The thief's heart began to race. He knew the routine by heart now. Arthur would pull out his wallet, count his money twice, always twice, and leave a generous tip that he could probably barely afford. What happened next felt like a scene from a nightmare. The thief burst through the door, knocking over a chair. The sound of plates clattering mixed with surprised gasps as he shoved Arthur, who fell with a heartbreaking cry of surprise. In seconds, the wallet and phone were gone from Arthur's pockets, and so was the thief. Timothy Ratcliffe, the restaurant's owner, was watering the sidewalk plants when he heard the chaos explode inside his beloved cafe. His watering can hit the ground with a clang as he saw a blur rush past him. Without thinking, because sometimes the heart acts faster than the mind, Timothy ran after the thief. His shoes slapped against the hot pavement as he chased the man who just hurt one of his favorite customers, the man who never failed to ask about Timothy's kids and always remembered their names. The story was about to take an incredible turn, but for now, Timothy ran with everything he had, his breath coming in sharp bursts, hoping someone, anyone, would help stop this cruel act from going unpunished. Time seemed to slow down in Mario's Corner Cafe as Arthur lay there on the cold tile floor, each breath bringing a sharp stab of pain to his side. The world around him turned into a blur of colors and sounds, like watching a movie through water. His body felt heavy, yet somehow distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "Stay with us, Mr. Mitchell," a gentle voice called out. A young woman in a blue dress knelt beside him, her face full of worry. She carefully draped her soft cardigan over his trembling shoulders. Strange, Arthur thought, how he could feel so cold when the LA sun was beating down outside, turning the sidewalks into miniature mirrors of heat. The restaurant had transformed into a circle of kindness. Strangers became family in an instant. A businessman loosened his tie and carefully cradled Arthur's head with his rolled-up jacket, while a mother held his hand, telling him stories about her children to keep his mind off the pain. In the background, a college student with purple hair spoke quickly but clearly into her phone. "Yes, we need an ambulance at Mario's Corner Cafe. An elderly man was attacked. No, he's conscious, but he's shaking pretty bad." Arthur tried to focus on the faces around him, but his thoughts kept drifting to his wallet. It wasn't just the money. Though living on a fixed income meant every dollar counted, it was the worn photo of his late wife Margaret tucked behind his driver's license, the only picture he had of her laughing at one of his silly jokes. His heart ached more from that loss than from his injured ribs. "Tell us about your breakfast this morning, Mr. Mitchell," someone asked, their voice warm with concern. The crowd of worried faces knew that for someone Arthur's age, a fall like this could change everything. One broken hip, one serious injury, and life as he knew it might never be the same. They'd seen it happen to their own grandparents, their elderly neighbors, how a single moment could rewrite the ending of a person's story. The minutes stretched like taffy as they waited for help to arrive. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Inside, a community of strangers held their breath, united in their hope that this grandfather figure, someone's Arthur, would be okay. They didn't know about his morning walks in the park, or how he volunteered at the local library reading to kids, or that he had a cat named Whiskers waiting at home. But in that moment, he became everyone's grandfather, and they protected him as their own. The chase through Hollywood streets became a blur of determination and desperation. Timothy's lungs burned with each breath, but the thought of Arthur lying hurt on his restaurant floor pushed him forward. The thief's sneakers pounded against the sun-baked pavement ahead of him, weaving through startled tourists who jumped out of the way. Just when Timothy's fingers were about to grab the thief's jacket, the man spun around like a cornered cat. Time slowed as a fist came flying toward Timothy's face, then exploded into stars and pain. The punch landed with a dull thud that made nearby pedestrians gasp, but Timothy barely noticed the pain, running on pure adrenaline and righteousness as he launched himself forward, tackling the thief onto the hot sidewalk. They rolled on the ground, a tangle of limbs and curses. The thief fought like someone who had nothing left to lose, while Timothy fought like someone defending his family. Sweat dripped into his eyes as they wrestled, his white chef's apron now covered in street grime. A crowd formed around them, phones raised to record what looked like just another Hollywood street fight. Marco, Timothy's young waiter who had followed the chase, stood frozen at the edge of the growing crowd. He was about to jump in when a shadow fell across his path. The crowd's energy shifted, like a wave pulling back from the shore. Standing there, as if he'd stepped straight out of one of his action movies, was Keanu Reeves. Dressed in black like a casual urban ninja, Keanu sized up the situation with eyes that had seen countless movie fights, except this one was real. He turned to Marco, whose mouth opened and closed like a goldfish before he finally found his voice. "That guy, he just robbed an old man at our restaurant," Marco stammered, pointing at the struggling pair. "Mr. Ratcliffe, our boss, he's trying to stop him, but..." Keanu didn't wait for the end of the sentence. He moved with the fluid grace of someone who had trained for countless action scenes, but this time there were no cameras rolling, no director yelling "cut." Timothy's grip was slipping. His right eye was already swelling shut, and his arms felt like lead weights. The thief was squirming free like a snake shedding its skin, and Timothy's heart sank. He was going to lose him. Arthur's wallet, with who knows what precious memories inside, would be gone forever. Then everything changed. A strong hand appeared in Timothy's blurred vision, grabbing the thief's collar with the precision of a master martial artist. The grip belonged to none other than Keanu Reeves himself, who had materialized like a guardian angel in motorcycle boots. With one smooth motion that would have made John Wick proud, Keanu pulled the thief back, breaking him free from Timothy's weakening grasp. Timothy fell back onto the sidewalk, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Through his good eye, he watched in awe as Keanu Reeves, the actual Keanu Reeves, took control of the situation. For a moment, he wondered if the punch had knocked him out, and this was all a dream. But the throbbing in his face told him this was very, very real. Marco helped Timothy to his feet, both men watching in awe as Hollywood's most beloved action star turned fiction into reality right before their eyes. "That's really him, isn't it?" Timothy whispered, his swelling eye forgotten in the surreal moment. Marco just nodded, too stunned to form words. The crowd had grown larger now, phones glowing like fireflies in the afternoon sun, as people captured what would surely become viral gold. But Keanu wasn't putting on a show. This was pure instinct and heart, the same quiet heroism he was known for off-screen. With movements that seemed to flow like water, Keanu had the thief face down on the pavement, one knee pressed firmly but carefully against the man's back. It wasn't the flashy takedown you'd see in movies. This was controlled, precise, almost gentle in its efficiency. The actor's face showed no anger, just calm determination as he held the struggling man in place. "It's over," Keanu said quietly to the thief, his voice carrying the same warmth he was famous for, even in this tense moment. "Just breathe." The thief's desperate struggles slowly eased, as if Keanu's words had broken through his panic. The actor's grip never wavered, but neither did it cause unnecessary pain. This wasn't about punishment, but justice. Around them, the crowd whispered and pointed. Some recognized him from The Matrix, others from John Wick, but today they were watching a different kind of hero story unfold. LA locals were used to seeing celebrities shopping on Rodeo Drive or dining at fancy restaurants, not stopping crimes on a regular Tuesday afternoon. Timothy watched, still catching his breath, as his unlikely ally kept the thief secured. Despite the throbbing in his face that promised spectacular colors tomorrow, he couldn't help but smile. Somewhere in his restaurant, Arthur's wallet and phone were probably still in the thief's pockets, waiting to be returned to their rightful owner. The wail of sirens grew louder until two LAPD cruisers pulled up, their red and blue lights painting the scene in alternating colors. The officers stepped out, already calling for the crowd to step back, but they froze mid-stride when they recognized the man holding their suspect. "Well, this is different," one officer muttered to his partner as they approached, their professional composure briefly cracking into surprised grins. They'd expected a routine theft call. Instead, they got a story they'd be telling at every Christmas party for years to come. With the grace of a martial arts master, Keanu slowly released his hold, helping the officers secure the thief. As they read him his rights and led him to the waiting cruiser, the actor stepped back, already trying to fade into the background like he always did after his random acts of kindness. But the crowd's phones were still recording, capturing not just a celebrity sighting, but a moment of genuine heroism that had nothing to do with special effects or choreographed fights. As the crowd dissolved into the afternoon bustle of Hollywood, three men stood in a moment of quiet understanding. A restaurant owner with a bruising face, a star who preferred kindness to fame, and a young waiter still trying to process what he'd just witnessed. Timothy's good eye met Keanu's gentle gaze, his throat tight with emotion. How do you thank someone for turning an awful situation into something almost magical? Before he could find the right words, they tumbled out. Arthur, he's not just a customer. Every morning he brings dog treats for the strays behind our restaurant. Last Christmas, he knitted scarves for all our staff. Timothy's voice cracked slightly. We had to help him. Keanu listened with the same intensity he brought to everything, a soft smile touching his eyes. Sometimes family isn't about blood, he said quietly. It's about who you choose to protect. He glanced toward the police cars, where officers were securing evidence bags containing Arthur's belongings. I hope he heals quickly. Then, true to his nature, Keanu began to step away from the spotlight he never sought. He moved toward the officers to give his statement, his black shirt already beginning to blend with the shadows of nearby buildings. He didn't want headlines or viral videos. He had simply seen someone in need and acted, just as Timothy had done. Marco, the young waiter, watched in awe as the actor merged with the crowd, becoming just another face in the city of dreams. You know, he said to Timothy, my sister's never going to believe this story. Timothy barely heard him. His mind was already back at the restaurant, with Arthur. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving his face throbbing and his muscles aching. But none of that mattered. He needed to check on his friend. When they hurried back to Mario's Corner Cafe, the scene had transformed. Red and white lights from the ambulance painted the walls in rhythmic pulses, while paramedics hovered around Arthur like guardian angels in blue uniforms. The old man was sitting up now, looking small but alert on the stretcher, his weathered hands clutching a shock blanket. Timothy! Arthur's face lit up when he saw the restaurant owner, then quickly turned to concern. My word, your eye. What happened out there? Timothy pulled up a chair beside the stretcher, grinning despite his swollen face. Arthur, you're not going to believe this, but I've got a story that'll make you forget all about today's trouble. He glanced at the paramedics, who nodded that they had a few minutes before they needed to transport Arthur. It involves a chase through Hollywood, a fight for justice, and... He paused for effect. Keanu Reeves. Arthur's eyebrows shot up, and for the first time since the attack, a smile tugged at his lips. Timothy Ratcliffe, he said with mock sternness. Are you telling tall tales to an old man? Actually, Marco chimed in, holding up his phone with a shaky video playing. This is one Hollywood story that's absolutely true. Timothy climbed into the ambulance alongside Arthur, ready to tell him every detail during their ride to the hospital. Sometimes the best medicine wasn't found in pills or bandages, but in stories that reminded you that even in the darkest moments, heroes, both famous and ordinary, could appear when you needed them most. The bruises faded, but the impact of that day left permanent marks of a different kind, the kind that heal hearts rather than hurt them. Arthur's body mended slowly, but his spirit? That grew stronger with each passing day. Every afternoon, Timothy would arrive at Arthur's modest apartment, arms full of containers packed with Mario's famous minestrone soup or freshly baked bread. These visits became more than just food deliveries. They were bridges building a stronger bond between the two men. Sometimes Timothy would stay for a cup of tea, listening to Arthur's stories about his younger days as a high school teacher. Tales that always ended with life lessons wrapped in gentle wisdom. You know what's funny? Arthur said one afternoon, watching the steam rise from his tea. That thief thought he was taking my wallet, but he ended up giving me something instead, a reminder that I'm not alone. The restaurant staff created a countdown calendar to Arthur's return, and when that day finally came, they had his usual table decorated with balloons and a hand-painted welcome sign. Arthur walked in, back straight despite his age, and found his entire chosen family waiting. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Inspired by how their community had come together, Timothy transformed his annual summer block party to neighbors looking out for neighbors. He expected maybe 50 to show up. Instead, the entire street filled with hundreds of locals, from grandmothers in self-defense classes to teenagers organizing walking for elderly neighbors. And there, in the heart of it all, was Arthur, now sporting a community guardian badge the locals had made him. He moved from group to group, sharing his story not with fear or anger, with hope. Sometimes, it takes a moment of darkness to show us how much light we. The restaurant Timothy installed a community corner bulletin where neighbors would post or offers of help. Arthur, an unofficial gathering where young people advice about life, love. You remember my first day back? I thought about you down that Keanu, not because love, the rest be one of